This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz podcast.
Miami is the center of the sports universe to me. It's the center of the political universe. I felt it when I lived here. I feel it when I visit here. And it was the center of the baseball world again in my mind yesterday. There was a perfect game while everybody was sleeping, including me. Finally got some rest and got woken up by CBS Sports saying, "Get on the air." Domingo Germán, a former Marlin, of course, has thrown a perfect game where we will now have to memorialize. Baseball just can't get out of its own way. We have a perfect game thrown by a man who was suspended for 81 games for domestic abuse issues in 2020, suspended 10 games this year, last month, for sticky stuff. And he is now on the Mount Rushmore of Yankee pitchers as the fourth Yankee pitcher, former Marlin, to throw a perfect game against a team that MLB wants you to forget about immediately, and now we can't ever forget about. It's the worst scenario. I pictured Rob Manfred sitting around figuring out what he doesn't ever want to see, and last night was it.
You think he's actively rooting around that 27th potential out? Please break this up because everyone's going to learn about Domingo Germán.
Throw something on the outside.
I have to admit, I just learned about him. He's been around for a while. Last night was my introduction to Domingo Germán, and I immediately found out about his past and the 81-game suspension and the horrifying details of his domestic violence.
You didn't remember him as a Marlin?
No.
So he was traded. We traded him. He was a throw-in, an absolute throw-in who's still a player 10 years later.
I didn't fart. I moved the keyboard. Everyone thought I farted.
Fart bear.
Thank you for derailing a conversation.
Well, it's just I got a bunch of looks like I farted. I didn't fart. It sounded like a fart. I knew.
I promise that the reason Rob Manfred wanted to have nothing to do with last night and would have called the umpires had he had a direct line. If he had the umpires in his cell phone, he would have been able to call and say, "We're going to need a walk here. We're going to need something because we can't have this guy as the face of our perfect game." What interests me about it further is that the Yankees now have to celebrate him, and so does MLB, with ads and with accolades and with parades. And they are parading out a domestic abuser.
How many perfect games have there been in the history?
This was the 24th.
Jesus.
It's been 11 years since the last one, I mean.
So there's no way to kind of avoid it. Like, oh, yeah, congratulations and keep it moving.
When you sit in Stu's chair, it does not, for this segment, it doesn't mean you have to be like Stu. You could have known it was the 24th perfect game.
Well, no.
It's right in the notes.
What notes?
The prepared notes.
What
We
prepared
don't have
notes?
notes. This is all off the cuff.
What notes?
Well,
You should know better.
What
I
story?
send notes to
What are you
people
talking about?
so people have an idea that there's been a 24th perfect game.
Where'd you-
So-
First one, Charlotte just had out of nowhere that it was the first one since King Felix.
So she just knew that because she watches a lot of baseball. She didn't read any notes.
I was
She
reading the
just knew that
CBA
off
last
the
night
head.
all
till
night
1:30 in
to
the
watch
morning.
the end of the game.
I just learned about this guy this morning. I walked in and said, "Oh, the guy's threw a perfect
got
game.
it.
Also, he's a piece." Like,
That's about it. Yeah.
I've been like eyeball deep in legalese, trying to decipher these paragraphs where they keep talking around in circles over and over again. So,
Are we paying you for that? Is that part of what, like, you had to read all 676 pages last night and not watch the perfect game?
yeah, pretty much, because they wouldn't ask me about the perfect game. They'd ask me about the CBA this morning, which I could not answer any questions about because I'm completely confused by it. So, yeah, exactly.
To be fair, that is kind of a means job. But, David, I guess your point that MLB is okay having this person in the league despite knowing what he did. They think that the punishment he got was sufficient enough for him to come back and play, and teams are willing to sign him. They just don't want him to be great at baseball.
Well, they're happy with him being great at baseball, but not historic. You
Not
want
that
to win
great.
some games. You want to be on a good team. Fine. But it's a negotiated. To be clear, his suspension was not just Rob deciding. That's the union negotiating with management saying, if you violate it, And like steroids, you go 81, 162. There's also places where there can be grievances and negotiations about how it works for his 81-game suspension.
But there are players that get suspended that could be reinstated on a team that no one wants to pick up because they don't consider them to be like appropriate to sign to a baseball team for
Trevor
PR
Bauer.
reasons or other reasons. So, like, what's the difference here?
Domingo Germán is a depth piece who is viewed as not having gone to Bauerland. Bauerland is a place where there is no recovery from. He will never play in MLB again. There's no memos that get sent out. It's just all the owners know you're not signing Trevor Bauer.
The unwritten rules.
The unwritten rules. Barry Bonds, Trevor Bauer. Nothing about Domingo Germán. The Yankees were not told.
So how do you collectively conspire to blackball someone?
Not on email, but during a birthday text. When you're communicating, it happens only orally. No phones, no emails, no texts. And it's not collusion. It's not active. It's word gets around. Hey, did you hear? I didn't hear. Did someone tell you? No one told me. You're not signing Bauer, right? No, we can't. We're not signing Bauer. Don't be ridiculous. It's when you do something in the affirmative, saying you're not going to do something when you know that you can't, but you think you're making your own decision.
I was going to say, is it even an explicit conversation that's even had orally? I've always felt like it's one of those things where the person's track record is so heinous, it's like, I'm not going to do it. Or some, here's another example that's not in the heinous realm. When Chris Bosh had his blood clot issue, and then he went to like 7 doctors to find the one that would say, yeah, he can play. That was one of those ones where it's like, no one's going to sign him. Not because we all got together and said, nobody signed Chris Bosh, but because no one wants to assume that sort of responsibility and risk inherent with signing a guy who could drop dead in the middle of a game.
And he tried to sign with the Lakers too, right? He was working out with them. He had the relationship with Pelinka.
Yep.
And they wouldn't do it.
They wouldn't do it. And so
they were looking out for his health.
No, they were looking out for themselves to not be the ones that got, rained down upon if something happens to him. You're the guys that you knew and he had to go find some quack doctor and you guys went along with it, whatever. Similarly, they're not looking out for, justice or whatever. They're looking out for the baseball team. They're looking out for, I'm not going to be the guy that signs this guy and then has to deal with the fallout. It's not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, to use one of your terms.
I have a different view of an injury situation.
But
versus a domestic violence situation.
Absolutely. But I'm just saying in both of those cases, this person is non-signable for completely different reasons, but it never has to be like a conversation with the commissioner. By the way, David, you can't sign.
Never the commissioner.
Or like it
plausible deniability.
There you go. But like there's never a conversation indicating a directive or, hey, this is what we're doing.
It's made pretty clear. It's made pretty clear.
With the domestic violence stuff, though, I feel like it's charitable to say this guy's so bad we're not going to sign him. It's often there was so much bad PR around this guy. It got out. Yeah. People found out. Yeah. There are people who've done horrible things who are still on sports teams. But if you have a situation like Trevor Bauer, which escalates to the point that everybody, you say Trevor Bauer and even non-baseball fans usually know if they're sports fans. Yeah. And so it has less to do with how bad the person was, I think, often from a team standpoint. It's how much damage is this going to do to our organization is the most cynical read.
And it's about like who's the most front-facing, who's communicating with the public. Domingo Germán not doing that, not doing it in English for the most part. Marcell Ozuna, who we talked about last week, another former Marlin, another domestic abuser, who is, his track record is horrendous. And as a player, it's relatively mediocre, except for a few very good seasons at the beginning of his career. He's been bad right now for the Braves, except for now, like the last few weeks where he's, been swinging a hot bat. But the reason he was going to get cut is because there's all this baggage. And yet, all right, he's hot for a month and we'll keep him around because well, we're not going to parade him out to the public. And what you don't want in the same scenario would be Marcell Ozuna setting some sort of home run record if you're Major League Baseball or anything like that. It's the dirty part of the game of if we can sort of just hide these guys in the crevices of our rosters, then we're fine with it.
People
but if
won't
they're
pay
Trevor
attention.
Bauer, who's an asshole publicly, then, we'll wipe our hands and say we did a good job.
It's
And that's the
actually what
frustrating
front
part.
offices do. The part of the calculus, Charlotte, is exactly that. How much can we get away with where we don't have to answer to the media or worry that we'll get any sort of blowback from sponsors or season ticket holders or anyone who's giving us operating money? If MLB feels as though there are going to be national sponsors who are going to want to shy away because of a situation, they will get themselves involved. If it's a more local issue, it's up to the team to figure out whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze.
And that's why MLB should not promote this perfect game, but promote the incredible story of the current Miami Marlins and Jazz Chisholm Jr. leading the way.
What a likable guy.
They're not going to do that.
No.
And the reason they're not, John Skipper I've asked him so many times why he won't promote the Marlins when he was president of ESPN, and all he does is talk about the Red Sox and the Yankees. That's all he wants.
Spot the lie.
I can't.
I'm just saying.
I
They
can't.
do numbers.
We had so many great stories here in Florida over the years, and you can say we didn't, and you can be upset as you want. Unbelievable number of great Marlins stories. We got a bunch of Sports Illustrated covers. We had Don Trell on the climate change cover of SI.
D-Train.
If you go back and look at the press box at Marlins Park, it's all the great covers. Did Jeter change that?
No, that's all still there. That's all still there. You got the body paint Giancarlo Stanton issue. You've got Miguel Cabrera with his backwards hat and sunglasses. All of those are still up in the press box.
You know who else has a lot of SI covers? At Fenway, the Red Sox. They've got a lot of
Boston Red
SI covers.
Sox.
Yeah.
They're
They're
if that's a barometer.
in the park, hanging up on the walls.
Giancarlo Stanton signed one of the Sports Illustrated
Does
covers
SI even still exists?
with the paint, which they don't exist, but he was on the cover, and he signed it, "Dear David, I bet you wish you could have painted this on me. Love, Giancarlo Stanton."
Hell yeah.
I said to him after, what is that about? But yet, we wanted it on the board. We wanted it in the hallway because we wanted the Marlins to be relevant where baseball does not give relevance to anyone but the Red Sox and the Yankees. And I've had enough of it, as a matter of fact. I think the way you end this is the Yankees should get zero attention, the Red Sox zero attention, and make it all about the Reds and Marlins starting today.
Ew.